Questioning is simple. According to Master Sote-san, it means wanting to discover and know what we do not know about human affairs and universal principles. It is the motive force that reveals what we are ignorant of when we try to accomplish anything. So what do we do when we run into a situation that we don't know how to handle? We might ask our teacher or mentor or our Sangha friends. That may work, but sometimes our question relates to something we need to explore on our own. Another way might be to read the scriptures. My daughter and I are both filmmakers, so typically she'd send me texts saying, "Mom, what are you up to? Watching a movie?" This week she wrote, "Mom, what are you up to? Reading scriptures?" That's what happens when you take a canon class. Yet another way is to let go. Our journaling class teacher, Reverend Park, calls this mission impossible. If we can't figure it out with our minds, we can let it go. This can take several shapes. We can choose a koan to contemplate, or maybe do something else, take a walk or a bath, and suddenly the answer comes. Last night before bed, I chose the scriptures that related to this subject, read them, copied them, then turned off my light and went to sleep. It's a good way to strike an idea in the morning. But most importantly for me is connecting to sound thought. I sit in front of my little altar where I have a small Ilwon Sang. You might take a blank piece of paper, draw a circumference, and tape it to the wall. I do that when I travel, using a dish as a compass. It works. When I sit, I calm my mind and body and empty my mind as best I can, having stated my intention beforehand, what it is I need to figure out. It could be something simple out of daily life, or it could be something profound about the principle of the nature. As we do this over and over, as with anything else, it becomes easier to see the answers clearly. A few months ago, I got a text from a disciple I've had in Venezuela since late 2017. I met him at a healing center where he was part of a group of young adults who had addictive personalities. He was 19 and was alone in the world. His father had abandoned him and the mother when he was 5, and the mother had physically and psychologically abused him. He had been diagnosed as obsessive compulsive, a difficult condition to treat. But he was a lovely person, incredibly talented, and had many interests in life. Yet, the center had not been successful in finding improvement in him, though he had been there almost a year. For some reason, when I arrived, he gravitated towards me. He asked me a lot of questions that intrigued me, and when I spoke of my practice, he was like a sponge. I taught him the Dharma and gave him my Spanish translation of the Diamond Sutra. We meditated every single night in my cabin. With a deep baritone voice, he chanted Namo Amida Butsu and commented on how wonderful, how powerful it was to calm his mind. I taught him moving meditation in the form of Tai Chi. Soon he asked his teachers if he could please get instructions from me instead of with his group. They agreed. Everyone saw his improvement. I had learned that what worked with him was having faith in his talents and capacities. So I agreed. 6 months later, he got an opportunity to go to Caracas and try out a new life. We stayed in close touch for a long while, then it tapered off. When we did reconnect, a long while later, I realized he was running against some of the same repetitive behaviors. He had become an art dealer and had it in his mind that he was being conned off his commission with every transaction. No matter what I said, his mind remained the same. He would give me a complicated story with the same ending. I told him how happy I was, that he was well and in touch. But I also said that I would love to hear some positive stories about his work. That completely silenced him, and he disappeared for several months again. I felt I might have lost him. Just a couple of weeks ago, I suddenly got another voice text from him. He sounded so happy and enthusiastic. He told me he had just made a very successful sale in Europe and had secured a handsome commission. I was so very happy. We crossed several voice texts, and he sent me pictures of the paintings he sold. When I put down my phone, I was trembling. This was a long due resolution from years of teaching and practice, and he had stayed with it. He told me he still meditated and chanted just as we did together. I was so shook up with the news that I didn't know how to handle my emotions. So I sat in front of my altar and emptied my mind, having asked the Dharmakaya Buddha for an answer on how to proceed. The answer came pretty soon, and it was then I cried. I was so moved. I remembered Reverend Yu's recent lecture in class, where he said that we all need heavenly affirmations in everything we do, just like the founding master got his heavenly affirmation when the thumbprints of his disciples turned to blood. I would like to finish with a short scripture. A disciple said to Sotasan, "Someone came and asked me who the founding master's teacher was. I answered that our founding master attained great enlightenment on his own and did not have a personal teacher. The founding master said, in the future, if there are people who again ask who my teacher is, answer that I am their teacher and they are my teachers." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you for sharing your stories. As for all of you, as you were listening, there's anything that came up for you or you resonated with certain parts of her presentation, please do share. And thank you for sharing that quote as well at the very end. Yeah. Oh, yes, Tiffany.
So, Isabel, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And also, Diane, thank you for the meditation. It was very relaxing, so it matched beautifully with what Isabel shared today. So, I was curious to know more of your insights, Isabel, when you said to know what we do not know when we're trying to accomplish anything. Um, because there's such a need to gain wisdom, right? That's what we're all taught. But at the same time, you have to let go of wisdom in order to really move along the path. And I was wondering, in your work with your friend in Venezuela, how did that match? Given, I don't know if your background is a therapist or something like that, in addition to being a filmmaker.
Oh, thank you for that question. No, I don't have any degree on therapy of any kind. I actually later, several years later, rather lately, I got a degree on coaching, but life coaching. But not then. I had no idea. I think that's one of the things that interested me on it after that experience. But no, it was just the Dharma. It was just, teaching the Dharma. And it was something more interesting. And that's one of the reasons why I realized that I learned so much from that experience. I have a son who has some behavior issues, and I wasn't that successful with him when I was young. I was too young. I was 21 years old when I had him. So I didn't have the wisdom that I acquired later. And so I learned so much from dealing with this young man that I was able to transform my relationship with my son after that. So it really, I don't think so much. It's an interesting question that you asked about letting go of wisdom. I think we have to let go, not of wisdom, but of our active mind to find the answers to things. But our wisdom is always going to be there. Whatever wisdom we acquire, it just grows. We don't let it go. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, Christine. Thank you.
Good evening. So thank you, Diane. Yes, that was a beautiful, calming meditation. I really enjoyed that. And I agree. It really went with Isabel's talk. And the part where you said no grasping, no, nothing to grasp, nothing to push away. So when Isabel had to work with this young man and make that decision, she had to decide what to show him and what not to show him so that he wasn't overwhelmed. Because I would imagine that, trying to fill him in on some pieces of the Dharma and Won Buddhism could be really overwhelming, especially as a young man. And so like, I was trying to figure out, like, how did you know how far to go with him, and then how much to let go, like, and just let him question and figure things out on his own? Like, where did you, I mean, my husband and I have stepped in and helped at times with our kids' friends who have had difficulty. And there were times that it worked and times that it didn't. We'd never used a faith system with them, but we just used the way we were living. But you are actually teaching him Won Buddhism. So what did you do yourself? Like, did you have to meditate a lot? What did you have to do to make some of those decisions?
It was never a decision like that. It was just very flowing. This was a very intelligent young man that really wanted to learn, and he was not getting what he needed. And he had not gotten what he needed from anybody at home either, obviously. So he was just so willing to learn. I mean, I gave him the Diamond Sutra. That's a very, very difficult thing to read. I'm not going to say he understood it, but we could talk about it. And he was interested in emptiness, and he was interested in, one of the things I would do is I was writing a Dharma talk to give to the other kids about the nature of reality. So what I would do is I would give him my handwriting on a pad, and I would say, transcribe it into my iPad. And he just loved doing that because it was a great way to learn. And then he would remember certain areas and he would repeat them to me. And it would suddenly, out of nowhere, he would say, oh, that's prajna. It was just like he just grasped things, and it was great to have a disciple like that. I mean, you don't get that many like that.
Yeah.
So I was lucky.
So it was a real collaboration back and forth.
Yeah, and he, like I said, I mean, like he had a psychologist, and she was one of the people that encouraged him. And she's told me that because I've seen her later. And she's told me that when I saw what you were doing with him, I really encouraged him to ask to have you as his teacher. She was the one that kind of helped him get his real teachers to say okay to my instructions to him, because I wasn't teaching him anything about addiction. I wasn't teaching him anything about anything else about, you know, his daily life in terms of, you know, hygiene or anything. I was just teaching him the Dharma, but that's what he needed. So, you know, I can't say that I made many decisions. It just flowed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, James.
Go ahead, Wendo.
Yes. Thank you, Isabel and Diane, for meditation and your Dharma talk. I really resonated with we always talk a lot about emptiness and letting go, and I admire that so much about you, Isabel. In reading chapter 6 of what the Buddha taught this week, I really struggled with that chapter quite a bit, because I just realized that I have a lot of work to do in letting go of this concept of self and soul and so on, and I don't know about how to go about doing that, because I guess a lot of it is so ingrained in the Christian Catholic tradition that was just throughout my entire life, that the idea of not having self and soul and being empty is a real challenge to contemplate. And so when we talk about cases for questioning, that's one that I'm constantly questioning and thinking through a lot this last week. And so I'm wondering, for anyone in the group, I mean, how has been your process of contemplating self and letting go of self and realizing emptiness in self?
Is that a question for me or for the
I
group?
think for you or anyone in the group, because there's so much wisdom in the group to learn from.
I in my case, I don't know, maybe if it's from other lifetimes, you know, it just really resonated with me the first time I encountered it. You know, it just, the first time I read the Heart Sutra, I just said, oh, emptiness is form is emptiness. Yes, that's it. You know, I just got it. So I don't know what it is. You know, I think it's an affinity or past lives, like I said, I don't know. But it's something that just it's like it's like a moment of illumination that comes when a koan like that really strikes the chord, you know. So working with koans is a really, really good way to, you know, get past like set ideas about things that we have. And I do love that chapter 6 of what the Buddha taught. I think it's an amazing, amazing text. And I would love to discuss that in class sometime, because there's so many questions arise, but it's such absolutely beautiful teaching. And thank you for asking. So anybody else who wants to talk about it? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
I'm working on a Dharma talk for my temple. It's not till next April, but I'm scared to death about giving a Dharma talk. So I'm working on it now and going through the scriptures and every Buddhism book I have, taking notes. And today, in fact, I was reading a wonderful book called Eco Dharma, and I can't recall the name of the author, which is common with me. But at any rate, talked a lot about heaven and earth. That's the topic of my talk, will be heaven and earth, and how it's all one. It's all part of the universe, and we're part of that. And I was thinking, you know, again, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. If I look up in the sky during daylight, other than maybe the sun, I won't look at the sun, I see emptiness, just a big emptiness. When I look up in the sky at night, I see stars and the moon, but infinity, that there's no end. There is no end to space. We've gone to the moon and we've sent satellites to Mars, but there's no end to any of it. And I'm part of this, the earth, the sky. A lot of my thoughts are about nature and being in the woods and that sort of thing, sentient beings. And we're all made out of the same, this text also talked about, we're all made out of the same materials that the water and the woods and the other animals and the rocks are made of, as we're made of the same things that the sky is made of, the planets in the sky. So we're all one. Therefore, there really is no self. We're all part of one universe. We're all part of each other. It even mentions, by the way, we have 98, 99% of our DNA is the same as chimpanzees and bonobos, right? And in fact, 99.99%, we have the same DNA as each other, whether you're black or white or tall or short or whatever, we're the same. And we're the same with the earth and the sky. And so I find actually the easiest thing is just going outside and looking up at the stars at night and thinking, I'll never understand it, but I'm part of this. And therefore, it's all emptiness. That's as good as I can do.
I think you just gave your Dharma talk, Bob.
Okay. Did you have any, Isabel, any responses to that, or any closing responses, or?
I think that's beautiful. I think
Yeah.
we're all amazed by infinity and emptiness, and I like very much what he said and what James said too.
Mm.
And thank you for the questions, and I'm glad you found it interesting. It's a beautiful experience for me. Chris?
Oh, and Christine, I think Christine had something.
Are you finished, Isabel?
I am, yes.
Okay. So I had a number of discussions with friends this week, and I think one of the things that can throw me and other people, especially if you were raised as a Christian or a Catholic or Protestant or whatever, is that when you hear that word heaven, you always think of this God in the sky who's running things, and you're going to get either punished or rewarded. And it's like it's this straight line you march on, you get slapped, you keep going, whatever, you get slapped again. It's very different than thinking of things in a circular fashion. So I think, you have to widen the lens and realize that there's so many, for me, other ways of looking at that big picture instead of the rigidity of some of the things that I was taught as a kid that still stick with me, that I've had to release. Yeah, how do you release them? Well, you keep studying, you keep questioning, you keep doing all this stuff. But that's one of the questions and answers and discussions I had with friends this week about that whole, because it gets set in your head as a kid. It's a vision that's there. So I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it kind of helped me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Christine. Definitely helpful.
Just to piggyback off what Christine was saying, I think that's the power of inquiry, especially in the one Buddhist tradition, is that we do talk about the aspect of emptiness or great, but we also have the great small, being and non-being. Because some people can fall onto one side of the emptiness side of things, but we also have the small, the marvelous existence, the phenomenal part. So when we're doing inquiry, always take into consideration the big, the emptiness part, but understanding that from that emptiness, there is a marvelous existence, but there's also that element of change. And if we analyze situations from those different perspectives, as Christine was saying, you're right, we can fall into conceptual thinking, kind of have ingrained ways of thinking, fall into self-righteousness, like I'm right, this is my stance and I'm right, and not having the ability or the flexibility to put ourselves in another person's shoes. So, you know, the practice, I think a very helpful practice is to sometimes being able to say, well, why is that person responding in that way? What's their perspective? What's their history? Kind of giving us a little bit more space to see what could be the other view. And that's why I think Master Sotasan was saying, you know, with human affairs and universal principles, the whole world is our living scripture. And it gives us the opportunity, right, to analyze. And in the end, the whole point is in any situation to be able to adjudicate, to make a wise decision. You know, sometimes it requires time. Sometimes you have to do it right in that moment, but to have that wisdom to be able to do that. And so inquiry is a powerful tool. And it helps us to not just accept things because someone said so, but to actually ask the question, why? You know, why? Like, why does my teacher telling me to do this? It's not, oh, because my teachers tell me to. Sometimes they, you know, teachers do have a deeper, wider, and a long-term perspective that's helpful. But it's always, he's always, Master Sutta-san is saying, well, ask the question, well, why, right? And if one has belief, one gains trust in the teacher, then there comes a point where you don't necessarily have to ask why all the time. Just say, well, let me do it. There's a surrender and saying that I trust you enough as a teacher that if I were to do this, it would lead me to a wholesome path. You know? But up until then, it may require some of that healthy skepticism. Yeah. All righty. So, Reverend Yu, it's time for you.
Okay, thank you so much for the wonderful leading of the meditation as well as a beautiful presentation. Okay, the background of the James screen is amazing. James, would you email me the photo of that Ilwan-san? Yeah, later. Yeah. Okay, yeah, thank you. Some years ago, I stayed in Korea for a couple of months for some business. And one night, I had to go to the Iksan city where the Korean headquarters of Won Buddhism is located from my hometown, Daegu. And my friend, he was between jobs and he had a time and he would like to talk with me. So he drove his car to give me a ride to Iksan city. It was night, but you know, the Korean navigator, the program is amazing. But ding, 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 in 100 yards, make a left, but be careful, there is a camera, you better check your speed, etc. It's very specific and meticulous. He told me, I wish that in my life, I had that kind of a navigator, which tells me which direction I'm supposed to go in a very concrete way. So at the time, I showed him the scripture. This is the navigator, a wonderful map that guides your life, as long as you read that and put that into action. So that's the thing we started last Thursday. If you have a free time, be mindful to deepen your acquaintance with these scriptures. Scripture is the path. But think about that. If it is not night, it's a broad daylight. You're just driving. your neighborhood. You don't need any map or navigator. Map or navigator is the words of the realized teacher. For the unawakened people, we have to rely on those words. But if we are completely awakened, it's just driving our neighborhood in the broad daylight. You do not have to see the navigator or map. Buddhism, Bulgyo, Buddhism is the translation of the Chinese word Bulgyo, which literally means the path to enlightenment. The path to enlightenment. That's the characteristic or strength of Buddhist teaching. So what is the path to enlightenment? Based on the scripture which we studied last Thursday, particularly in the Zen tradition, the Mahayana tradition, working with the Kuan, contemplating Kuan is the shortcut to enlightenment. So this is what we are studying tonight. How many people contemplate the work with the Kuan on a regular basis? How many people have never heard about the Kuan, what Kuan means? Okay, most of you are in the middle. Okay. So the scripture says people who have achieved a basic knowledge of the scripture be mindful to study and practice Koan, the cases of questioning. One day, one of our founding master's disciples brought his friend to Sotesan. And his friend asked to our founding master. He's living in the secular world. He's not living in the practice community. So his mind is always anxious. His mind is not centered most of the time. So his question was, how can I pacify my mind? How can I center my mind? If you meet the founding master, probably that may be the question you would like to ask. Do you know how our founding master replied? How can I center my mind? So if you were in the seat of our founding master, what would be your reply? John, how would you say to that person?
Well, I'd probably say follow the threefold path, but I'm guessing he probably had something simpler to say than that.
Okay. How about Pat? Pat?
Meditate.
Yeah. If I were in his seat, I also would like to recommend meditate. Why don't you meditate on a regular basis? If sitting meditation does not work, probably I have taught walking meditation, prostration, or hand cupping scripture meditation. But our founding master's reply was very different, very unexpected when I read that chapter. Let me read. To keep a right mind, first of all, you must be enlightened to the origin of the mind. And you need to use the mind not in a prejudiced way. If you would like to know why this is so, study this Kuan. And he wrote, all principles and the things return to one. Where does that one return to? He gave him a coin. In order to use your mind well, the point of our founding master was you have to realize the nature of the mind. You have to know how your mind functions. It's called the awakening or enlightenment. Each and different teacher may have said a lot of a different approach. But this founding master's reply really hit the core, hit the head of the nail. When I was a pre-minister, in one semester, on my forehead, some kind of the reddish rash start to develop. It's not only very itchy, it's very embarrassing. It's very reddish and it's very ugly. So I met one dermatologist in Wongang University Hospital, and he gave me some ointment, and nothing will work well. And even after the biopsy test, he was not sure what was the cause. During the summer vacation, when I went back to my hometown, and I happened to meet one acupuncturist and herb doctor. He checked my purse and said, the origin of your rash is your weakened kidney. Your kidney does not function very well. Why? You are very tired. Very simple. If you have a full rest, good rest, the rash will disappear. After 1 month, when I had very good rest and recharged myself, the rash completely disappeared. For some matter, some causes are very superficial and apparent. Some are really root cause, fundamental cause. In my case, weakened kidney is the fundamental cause. Virus or whatever, I do not know. Some kind of a bacteria caused this reddish rash. It's a superficial cause. Why we cannot use our mind very well? The fundamental cause is since we have not awakened to the nature of our mind. Very simple. That's why awakening, enlightenment is very important. Not only important, it's very practical. As well as long as we would like to live a free and happy life. That's why our third head Dharma master said, the most urgent thing for the practitioner is to be enlightened to our original nature. Yeah. Then the question is, how can we get enlightened? How can we walk on that path, on that destination very well? What does that Buddha, that Sanskrit mean, Buddha? The Buddha literally means what?
Awakened.
Yeah, the awakened one, the enlightened one. Awakened to what? Enlightened to what? Buddha was awakened to the ultimate reality. our true self. In order to realize our true self, the starting point is you have to raise a question first. Very simple. Without a questioning, you cannot get the answer.
Mm.
In the Buddha's case, the question was the mystery of life and death. He thought about that when he was young, even though he was a prince. The nature of the human life is dukkha, dissatisfaction. To all people, there's no exception. Something pleasant could happen, but Buddha said it's still dukkha. Why? It's not permanent. It's gone eventually. And you have to encounter something unsatisfactory aspect of a life repeatedly. So why we encounter that kind of a suffering? It is because we are born in this world. What caused the people to come in this world? Not the biological question. That was the Shakyamuni Buddha's question. So anyway, in his mid-30s, he solved that question. When, think about, at night, under the full moon, the surface of the lake can very accurately reflect the moon. But if there are a lot of ripples on the surface of the lake, you cannot see the moon. When your mind is very calm and tranquil, lots of questions arise in your mind. Whether you are Christian, Islam, Buddhist, or atheist, it does not matter. When I was right after regular college, I was a Christian for 2 years. One church elder taught us, led some Bible study, and he's a really amazing guy. He told what he experienced when he was 7 years old. He was born and raised in the Christian family. Whenever he happened to hear the word eternal, he was enwrapped in a very, very strange feeling. What is eternal? What is God? What is eternal? It's not in the level of children's curiosity. He was overwhelmed, and whenever that kind of a feeling arises, then he told us he rushed to the nearby church and cried and prayed, Lord, let me know what eternal means. Especially to the many Zen priests, when their mind is empowered and calm-centered, lots of questions arise. Lots of questions arise. So let me read. This is from Additional Discourse of our Founding Master. Let me read. Driven by great motivation in spiritual search, when a practitioner's study and the practice have reached a certain depth, he becomes so preoccupied with one great question that all other questions merge into one. Whether one is asleep or awake, or whether one sees or hears, every word, silence, action, and the rest turns into that question, so that the entire heaven and earth seems to be surrounded by it. Then suddenly, once one attains a thought that breaks through that one great question, all doubt dissipates, and a genuine wisdom arise. Since the wisdom you have attained by seeing, listening, and thinking is only the first step to the first door in the long sequence of doors in awakening, in attaining great wisdom, you are not to be satisfied with what you have acquired so far. All the rivers eventually reach to one ocean. The ultimate question is, what is this? What is this? We usually call the mind original nature, but it's just the word, the concept. What's the reality of that? But to the average practitioner, that kind of genuine questions don't arise easily. So traditionally, Buddhist masters gave some kind of cases of questioning to their disciples. For example, what's the sound of one hand clapping? Or we all know Shakyamuni Buddha, when he attained a great enlightenment in his at the age of 35, till he died at the age of 81. Anyway, for 49 years, he has taught Dharma. That's the historical fact. But the Buddha said, on deathbed, from the period of the Deer Park, that means he first taught the Four Noble Truths, the first teaching. From the Deer Park to this time, 49, I have never taught a single Dharma. What does that mean? What those contradictory words mean? What could be so sure that we have eyes, nose, ears, tongue, body, and mind? Life can be suffering or no suffering. It can be subjective. But is that a reality? We have eyes, nose, ear, tongue, and body and mind? But why the Heart Sutra says, in reality, there is no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. That's the core, the questions. It sounds very puzzling and contradictory because we have not reached home. We are living in a foreign land, in the thinking mind. Koan is the Japanese pronunciation of Gong'an, the Chinese word. Gong means the public, the official. Gong means an means document, text, official document. Japanese pronounce that as a koan. In Korean, we usually say that Gong'an, but it's very. Why it is cases of questioning was labeled as a public document? Public document is, this is the criteria. This is something you can trust or rely on. By this document, we can tell you are criminal or not. You are awakened or not. when the teachers gives you some koan, in the initial stage, you just conceptually study and think about that. Or dharma's return to one. Well, to what does that one return? Very, very well-known koan. Or dharma's return to one, then to what that one return? One of the greatest Buddhist master in Korean history is Manggong. His teacher Kyung-ho gave him that koan, or dharma's return to what does that one return? He received that at the age of 19. As a novice monk, he's doing all kind of work, but he just thought about that, or dharma. So it's not his own. It's a very, very boring thing. Or that. After several years, when his mind is very calm and focused, a genuine questions started to arise. He was really absorbed in the koan. To what does that one return? Whether he was walking, eating, even when he was sleeping, he worked, his mind started to work with the koan. He was in deep meditation, where he's seated on the cushion or off the cushion. As a novice monk, one of his jobs is make a fire and steam the rice. When he built a fire, when he heard the cracking sound of the firewood, he was enlightened. Some of you are very good meditator. I think Isabel is an excellent meditator. But even though you think you are very experienced meditator, and on and off you go very deep in meditation, when you really carefully observe your mind, you still have very, very minutely fleeting, wandering thoughts you have. However tranquil the ocean appears, when you carefully look at the waters, there's some ripples, just like that. But when a genuine questioning arises, it works like a light. It dispels all those wandering thoughts, delusive thoughts. From that stage, you really go very, very deep in meditation. Just like you walk with the right foot and the left foot, that kind of a questioning mind and the meditation always go together. So our many Zen masters use this analogy. When a fish, when it's caught in a net, it cannot go out. Likewise, when a genuine questioning mind arises, you cannot leave the question. So our founding master said, our transmission verse, being into being, being into non-being, non-being into being, turning and turning to the ultimate, this void is also complete. He said, if you truly know this idea, this Gata transmission verse, you do not have to read any other scripture. So that's why number 4 says, people who have achieved a basic knowledge of the scripture be mindful to study and practice Kwan. The object of the Kwan can be some question that naturally arise in your mind, or some passage in the Heart Sutra, or from the Ilwan Sangpa, whatever, it does not matter. It does not matter. Do I need to stop here or what?
You have a few more minutes and then we'll have to.
Okay. So in Rinzai tradition, masters in that tradition says you need to work with the Kwan 24/7. 24/7. But in the Sota tradition, it's a still Mahayana Zen Buddhist tradition. But when you meditate, working with the Kwan is not that great. Just work with your breath. But on and off, contemplate the Kwan. One Buddhism follows this kind of a Sota tradition. So whether you work with the Kwan, in my case, when I meditate, after 40 minutes, my mind starts to wander again. Lots of thoughts arise. In order to focus my mind at the time, sometimes I offer some silent prayer, especially when I offer prayer in English, I have to focus my mind. Or I work with the Kwan. I basically work with my breath. From my experience, it's far better. But off the cushion setting, when you're waiting at the Walmart, the waiting line is very long. Of course, you can check your email using your iPhone, but whatever time, in whatever situation, working with the Kwan is very, very important. Very, very important. So after small discussion, we can continue to talk and study. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Reverend Yu, for that wonderful talk. So in your group, focusing on item number 4, so what kind of questions or cases of questioning or koans are you practicing with right now, or which question do you hope to work with? And so how are you practicing inquiry, right? So we'll put you in the groups right now. Great, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I'm sure all of you had a very fruitful conversation about item number 4, about inquiry. I would love to hear back from anyone from the group about, what kind of questions do you have these days? What's your experience with cases of questioning, or maybe perhaps some of you may have had obstacles to thinking of questions or practicing inquiry. So I open it up to you. Was there anything insightful or interesting that you heard from your group members or your own experience? Yeah, John.
Okay, so our group was Bob and Wando. I don't know your
James.
English name.
Yeah.
What was your English name?
James.
James, sorry. So we got around to mentioning what some of our koans were, and one that we spent some time thinking about was with rebirth. Why is there rebirth when there's no self? So we're kind of stuck on that one, if you can help us with that. And I can mention others. I'll just mention the second one while you're coming up with the answer for the first. One of the scriptures mentioned that the utmost good was to transcend wholesomeness and unwholesomeness. And I personally was having a really hard time understanding that, since it seems as though our modus operandi is always to veer toward wholesomeness.
Yeah, and generally we also spoke about how through inquiry and cases of questioning, how do we know when an answer to the question is correct in a sense? Is there some sense of wrong and right given the idea of non-duality? What do we land at through these questionings that give us a sense of assurance that we're on the right path, if there's such a thing that exists? We'd spend some time talking about that as well. So anyone can help us.
Yes, Brenda.
I am not all wise, but I've been doing a lot of digging as well. And, anyway, I have found that the ways that I know I've received an answer is just, I have I was writing them down actually yesterday. I feel enlightened, like I feel almost a weight taken off. I feel, a peace, a calmness in both my mind and in my heart. Like I feel comfortable with it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Brenda.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Brenda. That's your personal experience and you're able to articulate it, which is wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Now, wouldn't that feel nice to actually have a weight kind of lifted, right? A sense of clarity. Wow. Mm-hmm. How about Bob? Was there anything that you found? I think it was the same group, the three of you.
Yeah, I was in the same group, and we talked about how much we struggled with. Was it chapter 4 that had all the questions? And same thing. I could come up with answers, but they'd probably be wrong, and I wouldn't know that. But getting back to John's comment about if there's no self, then why are we reborn? And I mentioned, well, if there's no self, then what's karma all about? We talked about, I guess, the no self, that is your original nature, is permanent, but your physical body that you have constructed as a self is impermanent. All gets very confusing.
Is Allison here? Allison? Hi there. Oh, microphone.
Space bar. Okay, couldn't remember which one I had to push. We kind of bopped around on a number of different questions in our group, and Jay said her big question is why am I here? What is my purpose? And I think we all agreed that that is something that we spend time on and try to determine and come up with answers sometimes, but it's, to my mind, every time I have an answer, it sets another question for something else for me to think about too. We also talked about understanding emptiness, and Isabel spoke very, very kindly to us and explained about the two different kinds of emptiness, and how her total fascination with it, that she can spend many, many, many hours of her life just contemplating emptiness and its implications and so forth. And I talked about when I went to visit Reverend Bupp yesterday to have my acupuncture and massage. And I said to him, okay, I have no soul. I didn't know I didn't have a soul. What's going on here? How can I build up blessings and karma to watch then? What am I building it up for, and how do I reincarnate? And he kind of just told me just to relax, and he did talk to me for some time about, you know, yin and yang and energy and the aggregates in our lives and stuff. So in our group, we had some very interesting conversation.
Thank you for that, Allison. Taeyong, that's a really powerful question. Can you just briefly share with us, like, when that question came up for you? It's a very important question.
Oh, I thought about that question for a long time. I think where I work, that made me to think a lot. And I'm at work, all people I serve are physically disabled. And sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. And then I ask myself, why am I here in this country, in this place? Why am I doing? But I do feel good when I go to work. And I was asking, there must be something here. And I was asking, what's my purpose in this life? What am I supposed to learn? Or is it something I must give? By giving, I can learn something. So those things I thought about, and I'm still thinking. And I do think I found the right work for this life. And I find joy from what I do. And I am happy to see the people that I serve are happy. So I don't know. It's just still, I'm thinking, but my purpose in this life is sharing and giving, serving the people who need my help. But why? I don't know. I'm still thinking why.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's beautiful. Yeah. May I ask, how long have you been working there for, Taeyong?
Oh, 30 some years. I went there 1986.
Wow. You're probably one of the yeah, you're retired there. Everyone probably knows you.
I think I will retire from that place.
Thank you for sharing that, Taeyong. Thank you. And Diane's group, was there anyone in that group that would like to just share anything about inquiry? Or I think it was Christine or Tiffany or Patty. Christine, go ahead. Yeah.
We had many questions, and I don't think I have time to go into all of them, but starting from what is the ego, and is it necessary to have an ego, and does the ego only do bad things for you, or does it do good things for you? And then we also went into the whole question of the aggregates and having a self and no self and reincarnating, and what do you reincarnate to? And if there is no self, then where do you go? And then I had some questions about life and death, aging, you know, why am I here? What am I passing on? Who am I? You know, we were really all over the place. I'm not sure we had any answers, but Tiffany offered a really good phrase: every image a Buddha image, every offering a Buddha offering. And that's a phrase that I think answers a lot of questions, because if you are offended, or if you feel like something's really bothered you, think of it as a Buddha offering, and think of it as a Buddha image. And that's a good way to contemplate it. So I don't know if anybody else wants to add some more. There was so much. It was a great discussion.
That means your group, I think your mind was very still. So all these questions started to come up for all of you, right? No ripples in that lake. I'll turn over to Reverend Yu, if Reverend, you have any reflections after you heard what everyone said. Was there any reflections that you want to share with us?
One French philosopher said, I think, therefore I am. Actually, think is not a good translation. I reflect, I doubt, the original French word. One Zen master asked, if you don't think, who are you? Koan looks like a reader. But what is the difference between reader and the koan? By your thinking mind, you can solve the riddle. In order to see into the solution of the koan, in order to grasp the koan, your thinking mind should disappear. When I first read the Diamond Sutra, when I was 27 years old, I have never read such a book that's self-contradictory and it does not make sense. But as I said, when you come home, that's the reality. So why koan works like an object of meditation? It helps to dissolve your thinking mind. What kind of a koan you are supposed to work with? Sometimes you study. Sometimes you just work with a light mind. For example, on chapter 5, a collection of koans in our canon, there is a volume of a scripture that is written without a paper or ink. It does not contain a single word, yet always radiates light. Wow, I know. It's our original nature. I got the answer. That's not your koan. If you hear that, you have no idea at all. What does that mean? It completely sounds like nonsense. That is your koan. That helps you to drop your thinking mind. One day, one Buddhist monk asked to his teacher, Joju, legendary Chinese Zen master. When they have a free time, he asked to his teacher, what's the meaning that Bodhidharma comes to the West? He means from the India to the China. Why Bodhidharma comes to the China? What did the Joju's answer? Why did the Bodhidharma come from the India to the China? Joju answered, pine tree in the yard. Our third head Dharma Master, Venerable Desan, made a comment on that koan. It really penetrates the heart of the Buddha Dharma. So when you hear some koan, it really defies your thinking mind. That's your koan. That's the koan you need to contemplate. As I said, you do not have to work with the koan 24/7, but on and off. Zen master's analogy, just like a cat stares at the mouse. You have seen Hemi in our retreat center, Hemi? When Hemi catches the mouse, it stares. It's just so quiet, so focused. With that state of mind, you need to work with the koan. Then you will eventually catch the mouse. Great enlightenment. Let's all work together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Yu. So before we end, a takeaway from today, if you were to say, you know, from today's talk or this discussion, here's my takeaway, if you can just put in the chat box. So something that you found interesting from today's lecture or discussion. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. So I do invite you, we do have a question. If you have questions, you can email us. Please feel free to email myself or Reverend Yu. If you're on Populi, then we do have a question box. We can drop in questions there. And this week, week 4, it's your first reflection paper. So if you haven't uploaded that yet, you have till tonight to just email it to me or put it up on Populi. And other than that, we will see you next week, week 5. And I'm looking for a presenter for week 5, item of mindfulness. Yay, John. Okay, John will do that. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone have a very good night. See you next week. Bye-bye.